All right, so for my present and invention, the product or service I chose to look into and I'll be presenting on is Nintendo. During this quarantine, I think all of us have been playing an obscene amount of video games and watching TV. And so it inspired me to look into this a little bit. I always thought that Nintendo started off with just the Nintendo Entertainment System that came out in '85. That is not true. So Nintendo was originally founded, I need to read this because it's in Japanese, by Fusajiro Yamauchi in 1889. It started off as a playing cards company. And so back in the late 1800s, at this time, they had playing cards that were called Hanafuda. And they were flower cards. They had flowers on them and everything, so they would use for different games. And over the years, the playing card industry started to die. And so Nintendo, the business was passed down and grew through different generations. So from, what was his name again? Fusajiro, passed on to his son-in-law. He had a daughter and a wife, and it passed on to his wife's husband, who then became the president and took on the company until, I believe, until 2002. No, that was his great-grandson. Later on, his great-grandson took it on until 2002. So as the card industry started to die, they started to look for different businesses to branch out. They did hotels and cab services and other things that weren't successful. And then electronics started to kind of pop up. And one day on a train, one of the Nintendo guys saw one of the fellow passengers playing with the electronic calculator. And this was in the 60s or 70s, so it was a super early version. And he thought of, what about developing a game that you can play in your hand like this? And so the date for that, let me see. So the date for the Game & Watch system was in 1980. The game itself, there wasn't a separate cartridge. It came with the hardware, so whatever system you bought, that's what game you got. It wasn't until 1985, like I said before, when the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, came out, and that was one of the first of its kind, where you could have different games in these fatty cartridges that you would stick in. You have your little controller. It was around this time that it was actually during the Game & Watch era when they developed the first Donkey Kong, that the directional cross-shaped D-pad for moving around was first invented, and that got incorporated into the Nintendo Entertainment System controller. And so along with the NES system, you have the Game Boy that came out that became one of the most popular gaming systems of all time. And let me remember, that was 1989 that came out, so 100 years after the Nintendo company was first founded. Years go on. In the late 80s, they developed the Super Nintendo and the Virtual Boy instead of the Game Boy, which was essentially the predecessor for today's virtual reality masks and helmets. You would put on these giant goggles with a controller, and wasn't very successful. We don't really have those around. People still have Game Boys and Nintendo DS's, Wii's, all those things that have come out since then. Today, the big system is the Switch. The Nintendo Switch has consumed many hours of my life playing games that have been the culmination of years of development from Nintendo, like Super Smash Bros. That has a lot of different characters and has been developed through, I believe, 4 versions, starting with the Nintendo 64 that came out in the early 90s. So I guess what led to the invention of the systems that have come out since then, like I said before, was just consumer needs. They needed to stay alive as a company and as a business, and so they took their little playing card company and developed it into what it is today. It's a electronic video game empire, and it's extremely different from how it started off. It was a small, again, card company, and now it's huge, and it's definitely still in use. It's bigger and growing faster than ever, and it is awesome.